All right, it looks like the folks joining have slowed down a little bit, so I think we are ready to get started. Welcome everyone to the Family Forest Carbon Program webinar for the Appalachian region. Today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the program as a whole, give you an overview, the eligibility and the practices that are available in the Appalachian state, what enrollment looks like, what the once you're enrolled, what that part of the program looks like, and talk about the next steps and answer any questions that you have. Just a bit of housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded, so you will get a email link for the recording, and you can type any questions you have as we go into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer those at the end. My name is Heather Kingery, and I'm the Senior Manager of Account Management with the Family Forest Carbon Program, and I'll kick us off. So just to start with the basics, what is the Family Forest Carbon Program? So we are a forest management program, and we're available to landowners with 30 or more forested acres. We're available in 19 states, so from Georgia and Alabama in the south to Maine in the north and over to the Midwest, upper Midwest states, Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin. We help landowners to steward their land by providing forestry expertise as well as financial incentive payments to help landowners benefit from the voluntary carbon market. Who's behind the Family Forest Carbon Program? So the FFCP was created by two national nonprofit organizations, the American Forest Foundation and the Nature Conservancy. I'm with the American Forest Foundation, and our organization has been around in one form or fashion for nearly 100 years, helping landowners to make meaningful conservation impact and steward their property. We offer the Family Forest Carbon Program because we know that family forest landowners are a significant ownership of forest land in the United States. They make up nearly 40% of all forest land ownership. Traditionally, smaller landowners were unable to access carbon markets, and so we have created this program to provide that access to the benefits of the voluntary carbon market, to help landowners steward their property and improve long-term forest health. And the median acreage for properties that we've enrolled in the Appalachian region is 90 acres. So we really are trying to make this, and we are making this available to landowners with fewer acres. And we're funded primarily through selling carbon credits on the voluntary carbon market, grants, and private donations. A little bit more about how we work with the carbon market, the voluntary carbon market. Our organization acts as a bridge between landowners and carbon markets. So the complexity of bringing a carbon credit to market is taken on by our organization. So there's science to verify that the carbon benefit that we claim is true. There's reporting requirements. There's marketing and access to buyers, that sort of thing. So we take on that responsibility, and landowners who enroll in our program benefit by getting a guaranteed annual payment that you know at the time of signing what that payment is going to be for the 20-year duration. We, in our payments, have incorporated an anticipated rise in the value of carbon credits over the 20 years that you're enrolled. So we do anticipate that that will be carbon credits will be worth more in the future, and we figured that in. But we also insulate you from any risk that carbon markets don't perform as expected and the value of carbon decreases over time. We offer another program called Fields and Forests under the umbrella of the Family Forest Carbon Program. This program is available in 4 states in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. This is a tree planting program and available to landowners with 30 or more acres of open land that they are interested in planting to loblolly pine. So similar to the forest management side of the Family Forest Carbon Program, we provide financial incentive payments, forestry expertise, and work with landowners to reach their goals for their property. Fun thing to note about the Fields and Forests program is that you can enroll in both Fields and Forests and our forest management program through the Family Forest Carbon Program on the same property. So it's not a one or the other, but you can have both if you have both land types on your property. Getting into some of the benefits in a little more detail, the one thing that folks are always most interested in is the financial benefits for landowners. So as I mentioned, we have these guaranteed annual payments. You know what they are at the time of signing. Unlike a lot of other programs, our payments are not tied to any specific land use or practice or outcome. They can be used for anything. Of course, we hope that they will help you to achieve your forest management goals, pay property taxes to keep that forest in your name, in your family, but it can really be used for whatever you see fit. Of course, in enrolling, you are also committing to long-term stewardship. As I mentioned, it's a 20-year program, so over that time, the value of the timber on your property increases and can become more profitable in future harvests. And importantly, as a landowner, you retain full ownership, privacy, and control of the property. So whether it is a primary residence or a recreational property, you can continue to keep that private and use it how you see fit. If that's hunting, camping, fishing, all of those sorts of things folks like to use their land for, you can continue to do so. We also provide forestry expertise. There's a number of resources we provide. You will connect with an expert forestry professional, so a certified forester. Those foresters help to either provide a new forest management plan if you don't already have one for your property, or they can help you to update an existing plan. We work both with foresters on our staff as well as foresters that consult for our program, so you have a number of options that you can pursue in working with a forester. Those forest management plans are customized to your property and your goals. They should be created with your interests in mind and unique to your circumstances. That is a plan that you get in writing, so whether you decide to do some of those activities today or 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, you have that as a reference for you and your family to refer to when making decisions about the property. We also connect you with additional educational and potentially financial resources from our partners. That includes the American Tree Farm System, Audubon Society, and the USDA NRCS. And when you enroll in the Family Forest Carbon Program, you're connected with community. So we have enrolled over 1,000 landowners. So you're joining a community of like-minded folks. You can share experience insights, ideas, learn from each other, what has been successful on your property. You're contributing to your local community and place. When we have healthier forests, we have healthier, cleaner air, cleaner water, habitat for wildlife, birds, songbirds, all of that good stuff. And putting some money back into rural American communities by providing the financial incentive payments, kind of boosting the economic resources of the area. This is a quote from Susan Benedict. She's one of our enrolled landowners in Pennsylvania, talking about what the payments have meant to her and her family. They've been really active in managing their land, and the payments have helped them to realize all of the management activities they want to do on their property, as well as pay the property taxes to keep it in their family. Great. Now I'm going to hand it over to our forester, Nate, to talk about enrolled landowners and eligibility.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that awesome intro, Heather, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you're at. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about who's enrolling in our Family Forest Carbon program and who's eligible today. To date, as Heather mentioned, we've got over 1,000 landowners enrolled since the program began in 2020, and they cumulatively have like 140,000 acres, which is about 218 square miles. These 1,000+ landowners are receiving, cumulatively $37 million in payments that are committed to these enrollees. And these acres represent, these forested acres are able to capture and store 2.5 million tons of carbon over the next 20 years, which is the duration of our growing mature forest practice agreement length. For those who aren't familiar, one carbon credit, it represents 1 ton of emitted carbon dioxide, and one gas-powered car driving about 5,000 miles would emit about 1 ton of carbon dioxide. And in 2022 alone, I think I was seeing some estimates that humans emitted 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide just in that year. So, it's not insignificant, but, this is kind of one piece in the natural climate solution puzzle that we're seeking to activate to try and leverage to help mitigate this ongoing climate crisis. So Heather mentioned our fields and forest practice looking to plant active agricultural lands, but you'll note in the middle of the slide here are 3 regions in which we're enrolling forest land in various improved forest management practices. So you can see those states there in Appalachia, the Northeast. We've got some different practices there. We've got 2 different practices in those Northeastern states, and we've got 1 practice in the Midwest that's fairly similar to our Appalachian improved forest management practice, the growing mature forest practice. Of these 1,000+ enrolled landowners, the majority of these folks do have a prescribed harvest outlined in their forest management plans. And of these landowners with that prescribed harvest outline in their plans, majority of those harvests are commercial grade, in which they're removing some of their commercial saw timber volume, and 8% of landowners that are enrolled are currently in the process of conducting a harvest. So that's one aspect about our program that kind of sets us apart from some other carbon programs that you may have heard about in one way. So as Heather alluded to, these folks are not only managing their lands for timber, but also, seeking to maintain and enhance them for recreation. And a lot of folks that I talk to are particularly interested in enhancing wildlife habitat for game species. And these folks that enrolled are also, thinking long term as well. So, wanting to sustainably manage it and enhance it for their children and their grandchildren potentially. Forest trees are operating on timelines a little bit longer than us humans. So this kind of sustainable management is integral to, forest health, both for the ecological benefits that we all receive from them, but also, those economic benefits that can be tapped into when you're owning forest land. So these counties in dark green, these are counties in Appalachian region in which we're enrolling, accepting forested properties for a growing mature forest practice. But as Heather mentioned, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, not pictured here, and South Carolina, those light green counties, the entirety of those 4 states would be eligible for our fields and forest practice. We are looking mainly for hardwood forests in the kind of Piedmont and Plateau Appalachian regions of these states pictured here. Covering over 19 states throughout the nation. Yeah. As Heather mentioned in the intro, who's eligible? We're looking for landowners with at least 30 forested acres of hardwoods. And we are able to make some exceptions for properties that might be kind of on the cusp of this 30-acre mark. And Heather alluded to another kind of pilot that we're working on now to serve landowners with smaller acreage that might have otherwise be kind of historically underserved, to try and help those folks out. Beyond 30 acres of hardwoods, we also cannot enroll properties that have existing restrictions on timber harvesting activities on site. So we can't say that our carbon program's having any additional carbon benefit if those trees are already protected and we're never at risk of being harvested anyway. So it's kind of through that lens of timber value and merchantability, and having the ability to maybe pursue a commercial harvest, but maybe limiting that or changing it in ways that are more sustainable. That's kind of the lens through which we're able to create these carbon credits to support our enrolled landowners. And we can't have enrollees also participating in another carbon program that would. So with one exception for NCX participants, for those of you familiar, that was a program operating a couple years ago. I think they're no longer taking any enrollees, but they had like a 1-year contract that they were working with, and those folks that are maybe on the backside of that year long contract, those contracts are finished, so we are able to work with those landowners. But another aspect about our program is that a lot of our other carbon programs out there actually have much longer agreement lengths than our 20 years. So it's longer than the 1-year program that's no longer operating, but it's still shorter than some of our competitors out there. So our growing mature forest practice. This is our improved forest management practice I've been talking about. It's a 20-year contract, looking for those 30 acres minimum of hardwoods. And specifically, we're looking for those 30 acres to be stocked with a minimum commercial volume of 4,000 board foot per acre. We don't expect, potential landowners potentially interested in our program to know whether or not they have that minimum requirement. That's something that we'll send staff foresters like myself out to check, or consulting foresters to kind of as part of the qualification process. And we do offer free eligibility site visits to check that. As I mentioned, these need to be kind of naturally occurring hardwood forests, and the restrictions that I'll be talking about a little bit later. In a nutshell, we're trying to ultimately prohibit the ability for a woodland to be high graded and clear cut as well. But high grading is kind of one of the most ubiquitous timber harvesting practices in the eastern United States, and that's where in which they're taking everything above a certain diameter. It's also known as a diameter limit cut. They're taking the biggest and the best, and they're leaving the rest. And oftentimes, there's not a lot of economic incentives to maybe, do some of the work before and after that diameter limit harvest to ensure that quality hardwoods, native species are regenerating. So when you have a high graded forest with kind of intermediate shade conditions, that really, and in this day and age with, elevated deer browse pressures and non-native kind of ornamental species that are kind of everywhere on the landscape, if you're not putting in a little bit of extra work before the harvest and afterwards, it's really hard in this day and age to get a nice hardwood stand back on the landscape. So uh, ultimately, the flexibilities that our program is providing is to try and, encourage, incentivize through these payments, sustainable timber management practices. And coupled with some of these other restrictions that I'll be talking about, we also provide landowners with a yearly personal use allowance, where in which they're able to go in and extract dead and live wood from those enrolled project area acres. And we provide those forest management plans that Heather talked about. So if you don't already have one, you get one in year one, and we'll update that for you in year 10, either through our staff or uh, through additional stipend payments that you can use to offset any plan that you might prefer to have prepared and updated by a consulting forester. So the management plan pathways we've been talking about, we can either no cost to you provide that plan in-house by a staff forester like myself. Heather mentioned, any good forest management plan uh, takes the landowner goals and objectives and kind of contextualizes them within the current conditions of those woodland, provides you with a 10-year activity schedule that you're not required to follow to stay compliant with our program, but if they are your goals and objectives, these are activities that a qualified forester is identifying that if you do decide to implement them would help you work towards those goals and objectives. Alternatively, you can get that stipend. You can see the table here, what that stipend looks like based on the number of forested acres that you have enrolled. This on top of your yearly annual payments. And I'll note here that the forest management plan is able to cover the entirety of your forest land, even if you're not enrolling all of your forested acres. So that's this is one kind of major benefit to our program, and it's being able to kind of plan out unenrolled acres is kind of like another benefit to give landowners guidance on acres that there might not be paid for directly through our program, but we want to make sure that they have the knowledge and know-how and connections to maybe help them advance any stewardship objectives they might have elsewhere on their properties. And easements, so if, yeah, your trees are already protected, it's kind of hard for us to work with. But if you do have an easement, a lot of easements are compatible with our program. Land trust easements, for example, frequently have the language that kind of says, as long you can manage for timber, as long as, the plan is written by a certified forester, and as long as that plan is also approved by the easement holder. And that's language that we see pretty regularly and is language that's totally compatible. Again, as long as there's not kind of outright restrictions on timber harvesting, or if there's not like specific restrictions like limiting, how you could do that harvest. Those sorts of easements are typically compatible. Oftentimes we'll see like maybe riparian buffer exclusions that are like streamside management zones that might kind of prohibit sort of those activities. And in those instances, we'll kind of create buffers that I'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide, I believe. But yeah, we'll review those easements if you're able to share them with us. And that's kind of all part of the qualification process. Other easements that aren't maybe conservation easements, like utility and gas line right-of-ways, typically aren't an issue if they're already established. Those areas get maintained every couple of years, and those are areas that we would be excluding just because they're coming in and preventing trees from maturing on site. So if they aren't established, that could be a potential concern. There are like right-of-way easements from like the 30s that don't really define where they could develop it, and that does make for some interesting project planning. But it's not too common in my experiences to have those right-of-ways that aren't already established. But yeah, we'll like to work with you as best we can to make sure that the project area is going to work best for you and the property moving forward. So exclusions, we talked about these, the right of ways and things like that, but any areas where in which natural tree regeneration is being suppressed by the actions of humans are considered like non-forested areas by the U.S. Forest Service, and the U.S. Forest Service definitions of a forest are ultimately what we're using for our guidance as well as our baseline and determining, what is a qualified forested area. So yards with trees that get mowed wouldn't qualify. Gas wells, roads, improved roads, food plots, and things like that. Trails and woodlands aren't typically excluded if they're, just kind of footpaths or like maybe 4x4 paths. Anything that you might be able to drive like a logging truck down that might have ditches or kind of drainage improvements to it might be considered like an improved road, and those might be excluded from the project area. But otherwise, buildings, I was on a enrolled property once where we hadn't excluded a building, and one of the plots that we installed, so a random subset of enrolled properties will get measured every couple of years to kind of represent our growth cohort, and that's how we're able to generate our credits. One of those monitoring plots landed right in the middle of a cabin, so now we're trying to do a much better job to make sure that we're not including buildings, so that if we do have plots to establish that we don't need keys to get into uh, the cabin to measure the trees that aren't there, I guess. But tree plantations are also not like a naturally occurring stand, so we are able to include smaller plantations under 5 acres, but plantations that exceed 5 acres in size, we need to exclude, and that's because there's just a lack of tree plantations in the Central Appalachian region in our baseline that is collected by that U.S. Forest Service program. So there's just kind of like a lack of data for us to be able to enroll them with confidence and be able to say, and there's enough baseline data to see additional carbon benefit to including plantations. And these are also, managed differently than, natural stands. So these tend not to be a great benefit. And if they're softwood, there's tends to not be as strong of a market in the Central Appalachian region for softwood plantations. Understocked areas are also excluded, areas that are larger than 5 acres in size and that don't meet that 4,000 board foot per acre minimum that we're looking for. Um, Forest land by the U.S. Forest Service is any area with trees that has greater than 10% canopy cover. So like early successional fields with like really sparse trees and areas adjacent to maybe those fields that are younger, maybe having reverted from agriculture within the last couple decades, don't have 12-inch or larger trees on them would be considered understocked. And so we are again looking for areas with which trees that, at least in theory, are mature enough to be harvested. And that's where we're getting our carbon additional carbon benefits from. Especially important in this project planning process is working with landowners to identify future sites that they might like to convert from forest to maybe a non-forested use. So if you know that you might want to be subdividing and selling a couple acres or putting in a new pole barn or cabin on site and have a good idea where about that'll be located, we can work with you ahead of time to carve those areas out so that when the time comes to develop those projects that, our program's not requiring any sort of documentation that I'll be talking about a little bit later under our substantial harvesting site. And then, kind of in line with the understocked areas, non-forested areas, ponds, rivers, and creeks that are more than 30 foot wide get excluded and fields as well, because this is a approved forest management practice. The personal use allowance, talked a little bit about that. Each year, every enrolled property has the flexibility to collect dead and live trees less than 12 inches in diameter from those enrolled project area acres. I'll note that this personal use allowance does not count towards any trees that you would be cleaning up along roads or right of ways or around buildings like that are maybe hazardous and in decline. Our number one priority for enrolled landowners is to ensure that our program's not getting in the way of your ability to maintain the property and to keep it safe for yourself and everyone that's on site. But if you are going out into those forested areas and pulling out wood for firewood for sale or for uh, for the sawmill, you can see the table on this slide shows how many cords per year you'd be allowed to collect from those enrolled project area acres. And we define a cord as 8 foot long by 4 foot wide, 4 foot high of stacked chopped wood, which can fill a triaxle dump truck. So it's 5 cords is a lot of wood, even if but yeah, we've still met with folks in like central Pennsylvania where I'm based out of that maybe, burn exclusively with wood and, the 5 cords can be limiting. And I'll note here, we don't have this on the slide, but in West Virginia, I think Ohio, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, so a subset of those states, we've developed what we call the firewood contract, which trade gives landowners potentially an increased cordage amount per year that they're able to extract in exchange for kind of foregoing their ability to pursue any kind of commercial timber harvesting. So if you're in one of those states and this cordage amount could be potentially limiting for you, do note that we do have this kind of firewood contract that we're also offering that we didn't mention on these slides. So any dead standing or dead and down trees don't have like any kind of size limit. It really kind of goes back to that cordage amount. But the live trees that you might be calling for maybe timber stand improvement activities need to be less than 12 inches in diameter. And anything under 5 inches is sort of invisible to our program. So there's no cordage amount or restrictions placed on the removal of trees less than 5 inches in diameter. And that's measured at 4.5 feet above the ground. And we've made improvements to our personal use allowance over the years based on landowner feedback. And we're now, not preventing landowners from selling that firewood as long as it remains within those cordage allotments each year. So if you have a small firewood business, that's something that you can kind of keep going while enrolled in our program. So the substantial harvest allowance, I've been alluding to that. When you enroll in the program, what effectively goes into place is protections on those non-hazardous 12-inch or larger diameter trees within those enrolled areas get protected. However, one of the major boons to our program is that we give you the flexibility to still, remove up to 25% of the enrolled contract area's basal area, which is a forestry measurement that approximates tree density, tree biomass, and to some extent tree volume as well. So you can remove up to 25% of your basal area so long as you don't reduce the average diameter by 10%. If you're wanting to remove some of your saw timber while enrolled, you are allowed to do that so long as those activities remain within the 25% basal area cap and the 10% diameter reduction cap. And for any substantial harvest or removal of a 12-inch or larger tree, we require that the project area get inventoried beforehand and a post-harvest report shared with us afterwards to know that although while there were substantial harvests committed in the enrolled acres and larger saw timber trees removed, that these removals stayed within that 25% basal area reduction and didn't reduce the average diameter, quadratic beam diameter by more than 10%. So if you're those are kind of the overarching kind of programmatic restrictions on commercial harvesting that we put in place on enrollment. So like if you're just collecting, firewood each year, you'd be able to kind of lean into that personal use allowance to maybe do timber stand improvement work to get a little bit more light on the ground, to limit competition with maybe more desirable canopy trees. We wouldn't necessarily require any sort of documentation for those removal of those smaller trees as long as they stay within that cordage amount. But if you do want to do a harvest, you can. You just got to work with a third-party forester to make sure that and show us the data to make sure that it's staying within those overall limitations of the basal area and average diameter. And finally, any kind of commercial harvesting activity needs to be kind of in line with the state best management practices. Yeah. And, this is Tim Stout, one of the first landowners to enroll in the Northeast. Had the property in their family for the last 80 years. They've been, sustainably managing for timber, and they wanted to kind of keep doing that and also, make their forest a land of hope, as you can see here in this quote, and, ensure that it's acting as a carbon sink and also continuing to meet all their timber and recreational and ecological kind of goals for their property in Vermont. Um, and if you have any questions about all of that, please don't hesitate to put that in the Q&A, especially with regards to, the harvesting and the restrictions. But otherwise, please to pass it off to Jasmine Brown, our Senior Manager of Landowner Stewardship, to talk a little bit about enrollment and community stewardship.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. Yes, like you said, hi all. I am Jasmine Brown, the Senior Manager of Landowner Stewardship, and I'm going to be covering payments and what our next steps are for enrolling. Also, like Nate said, before I start any of that, I really want to encourage you all to put your questions into the Zoom chat, the Q&A. There's already some really, really good ones in there. I've been looking at them. And so once I'm finished with my portion of the presentation, then we'll dive into that Q&A. All right, let's get started. So payments and contracts. Once your project data has been collected by one of our foresters, our landowners are offered a 20-year contract. Those payments are based off eligible acreage and then the going rate for the eligible practice. And for example, in our Appalachian growing mature forest practice, we're offering $230 per acre. So in addition to your payment, like Nate spoke about before, you will be receiving a forest management plan stipend if you choose to do pathway 2. And that really depends on the amount of forested land that you own, like he said. So to determine eligibility, one of our FFC foresters will walk your property with you, and then a contract is created specifically based on the details that the landowner has given for review. It usually takes about 30 days for that offer. We give the landowner 30 days to consider the offer, and it takes about 80 days from when the offer is given or when we start the process to when a landowner is enrolled. And so to break it down, because I know 230 can get kind of confusing, like what does that mean? That is over the 20-year period. So we have these tables here to really break it down. So like I said, you'll get $230. That is your payment rate per acre over 20 years. In the first year of your contract, you'll get 20% upfront. Actually, yep, 20% upfront. In year 2 through 8, you'll get 3%. In year 9 through 14, you'll get 4%. In year 15 through 19, you'll get 5%. And then in year 20, you'll get 10%. And so we have a sample payment schedule right next to that. So let's say that you enroll 50 acres in the program. Over a 20-year period, you will get $11,500. And so in that first year, you would get a payment for $2,300 in years 2 through 8. So year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you'll get $345. In year 9 through 14, you'll get $460. In years 15 through 19, you would get $575. And then in that last year, you would get the remaining 10% of $1,150. So that's really how our payments break down. And then how do you actually get started? Because that's really important to know. You log on to our website, you go to familyforestcarbon.org, and you use the check your eligibility mapping tool to locate your property and then begin the qualification process. And this is where we would start the 80 days that we're talking about. You'll be able to speak to an FFCP representative where you will get to share more about your woodlands, your goals for your woodlands, and ask any questions that you have. Maybe they're getting answered today. Maybe you have some additional questions, but that's the questions you would get to ask on that phone call. Then we would connect you with one of our FFC foresters, and then either virtually or on site, They will determine your eligibility, like we said earlier, and help you really plan your project for what boundaries are going to be within the project. Once that planning is complete, you'll be connected with an account manager, and they'll give you a custom offer and a contract for your review based on the payment rate that we have going, and then your eligible acres. And then after signing, you'll get your payment. Yes. After 60 days of receiving and approving all of your required documents, right? Because we do have to look at them, make sure they're all right. And then 60 days after approval, that's when you'll get your first payment. Along with that stipend that we were talking about, if you chose to do Pathway 2 and had a third party write your forest management plan. And then after that, throughout your whole 20 years of your contract, you will to continue receiving guidance and support from our community and sustained engagement team, which I'm a part of, where we work to really address any questions or concerns that come up throughout the lifetime of your contract. You can notify us about any changes or disturbances on your land. That's a part of the contract that you're signing. And then, like more excitingly, we connect you with this community of like-minded landowners. We do quarterly coffees. I know there's some talks about signs coming up, which is really exciting. So you can be proud of the program that you're in and promote your land, and be proud of the work that you're doing to sustain your land. So yeah, so that's a part of what you do. That's how you get enrolled, and it's pretty simple. All right, so let's talk about next steps. What do we do after here? And I will encourage again at the beginning of this slide, if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. But if you want to learn some more about FFCP, maybe you didn't get all your questions answered, maybe you just want to share this information with somebody, you can go to familyforestcarbon.org/how it works. If you want to check your specific eligibility, like I kind of covered a second ago, you can go to that same website /get started and check your eligibility, pick out your parcels, and go from there. If you want to connect with us because you're really excited and you're thinking and you want to see if you're qualified, you can schedule a call with our team by clicking the link in your FFCP qualification email. Other than that, you can also call our team. I'm not going to read that number there, but you can see it there, and feel free to email us at info@familyforestimpact.org. All of these ways are great ways to connect to us, and we look forward to hearing from you. And so that is the end of our presentation. Thank you all for joining. We're going to take this time now. Yes, love the next slide. To take some questions from the chat box. And I will go ahead and start us off. Are there any deed restrictions or required easements or right-of-ways associated with enrolling land in this program? I'm going to kick that question off to Nate. Nate, let me know if you need me to repeat that.
Yeah, there's no a notice of agreement gets filed with the county that would let any future buyers of the parcel know that the agreement's in place, but there's no like restriction like or easement that we put in place, if that makes sense. I don't think it would be considered a deed restriction either.
Thanks, Nate. I'm just going to keep going down the list. I think I can take this one. Is hunting and fishing allowed on your enrolled property? What activities are prohibited once enrolled after the 20-year contract? Are those restrictions lifted? So I think Nate covered this in his presentation portion as well. So if I'm forgetting something, Nate, feel free to chime in. But yes, you are free to hunt and fish on your property. Most landowners that enroll are still using their property as they were before they enrolled in terms of recreation. And after those 20 years are over, the restrictions are lifted, but you're also more than welcome to enroll again in the program. Wonderful. I'm going to keep moving. If prescribed harvests are part of the forest management plan, who receives the profit from the sale of the timber? Nate, I'm going to kick this one to you.
Yeah, so that would be all your own profits and, whatever fees. Maybe if you're working with you should be working with a qualified forester, they probably might, you know, uh, get some percentage of the timber sale, but we have no hand in any timber sale. We just need that pre and post harvest data to know whether or not those activities reduce the basal area or the quadratic mean diameter by 10%. All the profits are yours.
Nate, I think you're going to be popular in this Q&A because they're mostly forestry questions. So I'm going to keep throwing them your way. Are there any requirements to replant trees after a harvest?
Yeah, so now that we've got our methodology verified, our verifying body Vera with their verified carbon standard is requiring that any carbon programs that wherein which a timber harvesting is occurring must ensure that post-harvest regeneration or planning is designed to restore carbon stocks within acceptable period of time. This is kind of newer guidance that we're giving to landowners. I think basically it boils down to just having a plan for kind of post-harvest regeneration, and whether that looks like maybe fencing in the case of areas where in Pennsylvania where it's, deer central, you almost have to have fence to get anything back. But I think we just need to have some kind of plan that would indicate that there is, some plan to get some trees established back on site, not just kind of harvest it and let it get maybe browsed by deer or overrun with non-native species or something like that.
Thanks, Nate. I'm going to try to give Nate a little break. I'm going to see if I can answer a few in here and see if I can throw some to Heather. I see one that says, is the annual payment considered taxable income? Yes, it is. Unless you are receiving less than $600, you will not receive a 1099. But if you receive more than $600 in one of your annual payments, then it is taxable income. And we send you a 1099. I have a question here that says, what happens if I sell the land during the 20-year period? Heather, can I throw that one to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the contract does run with the land. So if you transfer ownership, if that's selling the land, if it's putting it from sole ownership into a trust or passing it down to heirs, to your children, the contract does stay with the property. There's a form for you to fill out. You fill it out, send it in to us. Jasmine and her team will make sure that we get the contract updated, but there are no penalties for transferring that ownership as long as the new owner stays enrolled in the program.
Thanks, Heather. I see a couple of questions that I'm just going to keep you on because they kind of piggyback off that one. One says, how does a contract transfer if you pass the acreage to your child? I think you answered that one. And the other one is, are there penalties should property change hands prior to the 20-year contract? Can you maybe talk about when a penalty would be included?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no penalties for a simple transfer of ownership to your child. If the new owner exits the agreement, or if you decide to exit the agreement for any reason, including harvesting beyond the limits set out by our program, there is a penalty that applies. That penalty is 2.5 times what you've been paid at the time that the agreement is terminated. Again, we work with you, the foresters, in Jasmine's team, community stewards, to avoid that kind of breach of contract or those penalties applying. It's not good for you. It's not good for us if we have a terminated contract. So we definitely do everything we can to support you in making sure any transfer or changes are in line with the contract.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, Nate, coming back your direction. How do you define a plantation versus a natural forest? We have replanted and loblolly pine, but do not spray to kill hardwoods. We get natural hardwood regen between the pines.
It's a great question. Yeah, so the artificial origin of the overstory of the loblollies would indicate that it is like a plantation being artificially, originated pines and lines. If you do have hardwood regeneration coming up and it's significant in size, these are areas that we could potentially include I mentioned in my section that we're looking for predominantly hardwood forests. So as long as the basal area or like the tree volume or biomass in those areas is more than 50% hardwoods, we would be able to include them. But if they're more than 50% of these areas are in uh, softwood or they're artificial there, yeah, we wouldn't be able to include those. So, but yeah, it is nice to see in those pine plantations. Those are often some of the best areas where you see uh, desirable hardwoods regenerating, but which is yeah, we would need those hardwoods to be commercial volume and at greater in volume than maybe the surrounding pines in order to include them.
Thanks, Nate. Are there any restrictions when it comes to leasing mineral rights on your property?
I don't believe that there's any yeah you know we do work with landowners that have like gas pads wells on their property, and you know if those well pads haven't been developed and they might be developed in forest land that you may want to be enrolling, and if we're not able to anticipate that and exclude it out, you know that could be an issue. But yeah, if you have a pre-existing gas well on site, yeah, mainly, you know, if those leases would involve, you know, the disturbance of the forest, that's mainly where we'd be interested in kind of programmatic compliance. But to my understanding, no issues with any kind of below ground sort of or mineral extraction or gas extraction.
Thanks. I have a question that I'll take. I have some folks who are very interested in this. Do you have any pamphlets / literature from this presentation that I can share with them? I do believe this webinar will be shared. So this is a resource that you can use. And online, we have some additional documents too that can be shared. If not, I bet someone from our comms team can help you with that, Matthew. Another one. I am 73 years old. I am concerned about, oh, it moved, how much physical work will be involved by me over the first few years. I think I can take that one. So honestly, there should not be a lot of physical work required unless that's something that you're choosing to do, William. You can let your trees grow as big and as tall as you would like, or you can do a harvest, whatever. Honestly, this program is not just like a one size fits one person. It's a one size fits all is what I would say. And so if physical activity is your concern, that's not something that is required by our program. Okay, let's see. Why would we participate in this first program versus a comparable program? Heather, I think you covered that a little bit, so I'm going to pass that one to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of benefits of our program. Our program, as far as I'm aware, is one of the shortest contracts available. So we try to strike the balance between finding a benefit for carbon and forest management and contract length that is appropriate for landowners who may not be able to see, you know, 40 years or 60 years into the future, but could commit to a 20-year agreement. One of the other big benefits of our program is that you know what your payments are going to be for the entire contract duration up front, and you're insulated from those fluctuations in the carbon market. So we have the built-in annual increases to the value of carbon in our existing payment structure, and you're insulated from any downturns in the carbon market. The other thing I'd just say generally is that we believe we have really high integrity methods to evaluate the amount of carbon stored. We don't sell to corporations that are continuing to pollute, so we're avoiding like greenwashing, and we hold ourselves to really high standards in regards to what the carbon benefit we claim, as well as who we sell those credits to. And and that's a, I guess, peace of mind for a lot of folks knowing kind of our ethos.
Thanks, Heather. I'm not sure if we have a hard stop at 12, so I'm gonna continue going on these questions, and then if we have a hard stop, don't worry. We're collecting these questions, and maybe we can send out some answers to address them post-webinar as well. Nate, I'm gonna pass this one to you. Can two adjacent properties held by the same family members be combined to meet the 30-acre minimum?
Yes, thanks to great landowner feedback, I believe it was late last year, our team developed a multiple ownerships contract. I don't know that this would be needed for this particular situation, but if historically we needed the deeded owners to be the same on across parcels for each contract, now we're able to work with like John Doe parcel and like a Jane Doe parcel that might be discrete under different ownerships, but they're relatives, they're related, they're all kind of in agreement and communication with each other. We just need all those folks to kind of sign off on the contract. If these parcels are non-contiguous, they need to be within 60 miles of each other or an hour and a half driving time, which if these are two non-contiguous parcels, we also require we need like a 30-acre block minimum. So if these two parcels are neighboring and they collectively comprise 30 acres, that would probably be something we can work with. If it's like 15 acres here and like 15 acres like 45 minutes away, that would probably not be eligible for our standard contract. However, we all also have a this extra small landowner pilot for forested properties between 15 and 29 forested acres that they could be a better fit for, if that answers the question.
Thanks, Nate. I just received word that we are stopping at 1 p.m., so we have a hard stop now. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you for your questions. We apologize if we didn't get to answer them. There were so many good ones. We tried to get to them all. We look forward to hearing from you. If you have more questions, if you'd like the ones that we didn't get to answered, please, please, please reach out to the numbers and email address that we posted earlier. We can repost those, but I hope that everyone has a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.